What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Modern video. And while we are wrapping up the Pioneer RCQ season, which if you have not already qualified for, there's still a chance to qualify at site on Friday for the last chance qualifiers. But if that's not something that interests you, of course, we have the Modern RCQ season starting next weekend as we kind of navigate this weird world of Modern where we've had plenty of time post-Pro Tour, and the metagame seems to have settled down for the most part, but the discourse is still as high as ever on some certain bird wizard that currently exists in the format. And with Wizards not willing to, or at least doesn't feel the need to have an emergency ban for said card that we are potentially talking about, or even changes to the Modern format as a whole, we are looking towards an August 26th announcement for any potential changes to any of the formats, which is going to have a huge impact on what happens not only in the Pioneer RC, this is going to be taking place in October, but for the entirety of the Modern RCQ season as we kind of move forward into that format that you can either qualify to Regional Championship Portland, which I believe is like February 7th through the 9th, and then Charlotte, North Carolina is the next regional championship in March 7th through the 9th, and this is going to be the first set of tournaments that will actually qualify you for either regional championship or potentially both of them, depending on how dedicated you are to getting those qualifiers and playing in those regional championships. Of course, those invites are now split, so instead of one regional championship where the top 64 players essentially get an invite to the Pro Tour, now you have two different regional championships where the top 32 players get invited to the regional championships. But the only thing really changing is that they're giving out more world slots, so essentially the finalists for both regional championships will get to the world championship. And that's kind of where I'm going to divert from all that, because this isn't a video talking about like the potential regional championships, the mock-up and everything like that. We're going to be talking about the Modern format and looking at it for the early portion of the format, and then we're going to kind of make some predictions about the banned restricted announcement, and then potentially what the Modern metagame can look like going forward, and kind of identifying some of the powerful decks in the format, and I think things that are going to be kind of safe going forward in terms of, you know, if you're looking to invest in a deck long-term for the regional championship, or for the qualifying season, excuse me. But, of course, before we get too deep into any of that, we look at the Modern metagame and give out some predictions. If you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos from me where I post a lot on the Modern and Pioneer format, along with some other longer form videos, I implore you to subscribe and ring notification bell so you know when those videos get posted, and it is a free, easy way to support me and my content as we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And I literally say it every video, and I try to avoid kind of like that lead up and everything, but it gets me excited because y'all just watching the videos and everything, everybody leaving comments, you know, and everything like that just makes me really happy, and it just kind of pushes me to create more videos and try to come up with some more interesting topics about, you know, competitive Magic, but also trying to have a little bit of fun as well on the channel, because, you know, as much as my endearing personality gives off and I feel like I kind of talk like I'm a teacher or something like that, I do like to have fun. So you know, with all that said, of course, you know, let's go ahead and check out the Modern metagame and get into some of these predictions. So here we have the Modern metagame. I have a few different deck lists kind of pulled up for the decks that I think are worth talking about right now, and we'll kind of do a little bit of a general overview on some of the other decks that are in the format, kind of giving my thoughts, and that's going to be kind of the point of this video, right? So, of course, the giant bird wizard in the room is Bant Nadu, and this deck has been very powerful. It's been very good for a long time. It was a known quantity before the Pro Tour, dominated the Pro Tour, and then has since, you know, posted a 15% metagame share in the format. And this is sort of kind of creeping up towards kind of the Rakdos scam kind of, you know, territory, I suppose. You know, we saw Rakdos scam get up to like 25% or like 28% of like the Modern metagame at its height, and slowly started to come back down, but was, you know, very solidly, you know, upwards of a fifth of the metagame, if not more, which is absolutely nuts for a format like Modern, where in the modern times, no pun intended, the format's been very diverse. And even though Modern Horizons 3, you know, you have you see the Hogak of every set, right? I think Nadu is kind of the Hogak of Modern Horizons 3, but kind of for every Hogak that gets printed in a Modern Horizons set, you do have cards like Amp Raptor and, these other sort of cards that make a huge impact on the format, that make the format a lot of fun to play. And I think a lot of these energy cards have made the format a lot of fun, even though things like Wrath of the Skies can be pretty annoying to kind of deal with, especially since there are all these other, very efficient energy ways to build up energy and get a little bit of value. And Wrath of the Sky is essentially allowing you to dump those reserves for 2 mana to blow up a lot of the things on the board, really, if you're the Jeskai control players and whatever. And that, debating on if it's fun or not, I mean, I'm sure it's not fun to have your whole board wiped and then you try to play a big spell and your opponent has counterspell on turn 4, and then you feel kind of the game's over. But with that said, kind of with the texture of the modern format and the rising power creep, I think actual 4-mana rats just aren't all that great anymore. They have very little utility, where Wrath of the Skies is able to allow you to spend your more mana if you need to, or if you just want to store up kind of the energy reserves, maybe for a future Wrath of the Skies or for a Galvanic Discharge, or whatever you're kind of looking forward to playing with that energy. It's up for debate, but I think while Nadu is kind of the low light of Modern Horizons 3, creating a deck that is easily one of the best decks in the format and what pros kind of default to as the best deck in the format, there's a lot to like about the modern format going forward if we see a Nadu banning. So with all that kind of said, we're going to be hoping essentially that the One Ring doesn't get banned and Orcish Bowmaster. It's just something like Nadu. Because if that's the case, then this metagame ends up being pretty straightforward. It's going to be these Nadu players kind of leaking into, potentially any one of these 3 decks that you see up here. I'm kind of combining Boros Energy and Mardu Energy. While they do inherently play different, the base strategy, I would say, is the same. Just Mardu kind of focused a little bit more on Chthonian Nightmare and some of the other black cards, where Boros Energy is just, a little bit more of a consistent mana base on it with, some of the same cards that the Mardu Energy deck gets to play. Mono Black Midrange was, one of the only decks in the top 8 to put multiple decks into the top 8, where we saw, I don't know why I want to say Sam Black. We saw, Seth Manfield. That's the name. Seth Manfield and I can't remember the other player. They were the number 1 seed in the format, or in the top 8 as well. And they absolutely dominated with Mono Black Midrange throughout the Swiss. I believe they were undefeated in Modern in the matches that they actually played. And then they were the first player to qualify for the top 8 and just, fell short in the quarters, just like every other non-Nadu deck that was in the format. And even in the case for one Nadu deck as well. We have some other decks that performed very well, at the Pro Tour. We saw Goryo's Vengeance being a deck that, was 10-0 with Matt Sperling. I mean, if he just won one more limited match, he would have ended up being in the top 8 over, the 8th place Nadu deck. Now, whether, of course, with how hot Sperling was running, maybe could have won the tournament with Goryo's Vengeance in the top 8, but I don't think Goryo's Vengeance necessarily has that great of a Nadu matchup unless you have sort of that really quick disruptive draw from the Goryo's Vengeance deck. But of course, Ban Nadu can just also kind of win out of nowhere as well. So take it with a grain of salt. Eldrazi Tron is something that we saw kind of show up. We saw Ugin's Labyrinth being kind of this huge card. Of course, the whatever distortion thing where you get to look at the top 4 cards, exile the rest, put 1 on top, and kind of smooth out your draw step that way to hopefully find something like an Ugin's Labyrinth on the first or second turn of the game to kind of help you ramp. Of course, we've seen the Through the Breach versions, which are right down here, that aren't seeing as much play, but they do honestly look like a lot of fun. Just getting to put an Emrakul into play like old times. Of course, you give the Ugin's Labyrinth to kind of help you ramp into it, and getting to play things like the it's one of the green-red talismans to kind of help you get to 4 mana early on. You can One Ring and do a lot of other things with your mana and just kind of ramp up to this huge thing, and then Through the Breach and Emrakul and more than likely kill your opponent. We've seen Isn't Murktide turn to Dimir Murktide in terms of what exactly is going on. Turns out the black cards are starting to be better than the red cards. It doesn't really get to use its energy all that well. being in kind of the shell. So getting to be Dimir, you get to play Psychic Frog, which has been a very impactful card for Modern Horizons 3 and has looked very, very good, and it hits so hard. And I've seen many people like discard their hand because their opponent was going to turn 1 dismember their frog and save their frog, and then the frog ends up winning the game, which is absolutely crazy. Ruby Storm is one of the bigger letdowns, I would say, of the format. It was, first or second in terms of like the decks playing it. It seemed like it had a good Nadu matchup because it was just faster than some of Nadu's like theoretical fastest kills, and of course, it's just fun to have Storm back in the format for some people. But it turns out it's a game 2 and game 3 is just awful when people are prepared for it. And I think Storm kind of historically has been that way, where Storm is a very good deck in game 1s, and then depending on how prepared your opponent is for it, is going to kind of be your percentage of winning game 2 or game 3. And for the Pro Tour, a lot of players were prepared for it. We saw people like Kai Buddha playing the deck. We saw LSV playing the deck. We saw John Finkel playing Ruby Storm, some of the greatest players in Magic's history playing Ruby Storm and getting absolutely dumpstered, being like 90 some odd percent in their game 1s and basically being like 10% in like their game 2s and game 3s. Mono Black Scam is essentially the Rakdos Scam decks, but just playing straight up Mono Black. I'm not sure exactly what the difference is between these two decks. I don't know why you'd play Scam over playing something like Mono Black Midrange. I honestly think that just the access to Necro Dominance is amazing. So that's kind of like my thoughts, general overview or not. You have like some of these nerds down here, but really like these are kind of the decks that we're going to be looking at going into the modern RCQ season. In the early part with like Bant Nadu, I would imagine the people that are kind of like the early adopters of the deck, people that playing it and essentially hoping for a non-emergency banning are going to get kind of paid off because they're going to be able to play this deck for the first few weeks. So we're going to take a look at Bant Nadu. I have a Jeskai control list pulled up, an energy deck, and a Mono Black midrange, and I believe Gorya's Vengeance as well. We'll find out after I actually open this up and I start looking at my tabs and everything. But we're going to take a look at the Nadu deck because it is going to be the deck in the short term that I think you are going to have to absolutely worry about playing against. And then kind of like the other decks that we have to show off, the Jeskai control, Boros Energy, Mono Black midrange, and so on, I think are decks that are safe to kind of invest in going forward, and I'll kind of give you my reasons why they're a little bit safer investments going forward in a post-Nadu metagame. So let's go ahead, take a look at Bant Nadu, and get some of these deck lists out of the way. So here we have the big bad boogeyman of the format, Bant Nadu, of course. For those not aware somehow of what is going on here, this card, Nadu, Winged Wisdom, basically is all your creatures, the ability that whenever they're targeted by a spell or ability, it doesn't matter who owns or controls the ability. You reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, you put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you put it to your hand, and this ability only triggers twice each turn. Now, this ability doesn't trigger twice each turn. It triggers twice each turn for each creature. In conjunction with Springheart and Nantuko, you are able to, whenever you play a land, you can pay 1 and a green, and if it's attached to a creature, you can create a token that's a copy of that creature, which allows you for some of your loops to get to the point where you can Beseiju and Auto-Aura all of your opponent's permanents. And if you didn't create a token this way, you create a 1/1 green insect, which essentially means in either case you're able to then make you're able to target something 2 more times, and you're abusing it with like Outrider Encore, which can do it at instant speed, which doesn't matter about the ability, it just matters that you're going to target something with it. Also, Shuko just being this 1-mana artifact that has equipped for 0 that you can essentially do the same thing. And this one's, I think, kind of the preferred one because it is very cheap. It fits into your curve where you're just playing like a bunch of these mana dorks. You're playing a Springheart, and then you're playing a Shuko, and then you're kind of able to go off and do your thing. It's also fetchable with Urza Saga as well, and it's Chapter 3 ability. So you kind of always have, you have essentially 7 copies of Shuko in your deck if you're willing to wait long enough. There's Shifting Woodland, where if you have Delirium, you can just turn this into a copy of any permanent in your graveyard until end of turn, meaning that you can have this turn into a Nadu, you can have it turn into a Shuko, you can have it turn into Outrider on a core, what have you, any of these permanents that are relevant. You can even have it become a Springheart and Nantuko because you have everything else in play, and then kind of start to go off, make these tokens and everything like that. You are able to then Sylvan Safekeeper to like sacrifice your lands, target something, you trigger it, the Nadu and everything like that. You endurance all the lands back into your deck, and then I believe if you put a Springheart and Nantuko on an endurance, you're kind of able to, target your things with the Shuko. You're putting all the lands into play. You get a bunch of triggers, and then you can make copies of Endurances. You target yourself, trigger on the stack. You end up floating mana, shuffle all the lands back into your deck, and then kind of repeat the process. You end up generating a ton of mana. You're also looping, again, the Besagus and the Otawaras once you have enough mana. You have a board full of 1/1s, and you essentially stripped your opponent of any relevant permanent that is on the battlefield, and they essentially can't win the game. Now, online, this isn't the case. It's a lot harder to do it. You don't see a Thassa's Oracle in this list, but most of these decks online I've seen play Thassa's Oracle, but a lot of the time, too, you can just make a ton of 1/1s with Springheart and Tuco, or even just go through the iteration a few times, and you can make like a few Endurances plus all these 1/1s, and that'd be good enough in most cases, aside from your opponent getting to like Wrath of the Skies or play some kind of Wrath, because you're not able to efficiently loop through and Besage all of their non-basic lands and leave them with only basic lands. This deck is super consistent. We see a lot of these one-ofs like Volatile Stormdrake can steal relevant permanents and give your opponent this 3/2. It's really good in like the mirror matches. You see Sun Cleanser against like the energy decks is like a way that you can, once you kind of loop through your deck, this is like a way that you can then generate the mana that you need to like play this, get rid of all your opponent's energy, and basically make it so that the Wrath of the Skies isn't really an out. You have Haywire Might that you can get with Ursa Saga. You have Dryad Arbor, which is fetchable with like your fetch lands to then kind of give you an extra creature in your mana base that is allowing you to kind of target it with Shuko. It also has this interesting thing where if you enchant it with a Springheart and Tuco, every time you play a land, you can then pay 2 mana and copy Dryad Arbor, and then Dryad Arbor comes into play, and then you're able to trigger the Springheart, and then kind of continue to do the thing and make a ton of Dryad Arbors, giving you a ton of green mana, a ton of 1/1 creatures that every time you play a land, you're going to be able to kind of trigger it, get it started, and progressively make more 1/1s. I believe this happened in the win-in for Sam Party in the, against the Gruul aggro deck, which was kind of a neat like synergy to kind of see and everything like that. Of course, the deck has adopted Malevolent Rumble, which we'd seen in Jason Yee's deck in the top 8, and it looked very good, and now it seems like it's kind of become an integral part of the deck because it allows you to put a permanent card from among the milled cards into your hand, and then you create a 0/1, so it essentially costs 1 mana to do this, and it gives you another creature to where you can use it for mana, or you can use it to just have an extra thing to target twice with thanks to Nadu. This is the best deck for a very good reason. In paper, you're not going to be able to hope that your opponent times out. There's people playing like Rakdos Charms and things like that. But for the most part, understanding that if you, in the short term, want to try to qualify, this is the deck that you should play. You should learn how to loop your lands properly so that you can, Besage all your opponent's stuff. Again, Otawara, all their permanents, so on and so forth, and just try to navigate through a lot of the hate pieces that people are going to be playing for Nadu. But again, like this is the best deck to be playing, and it's the best deck for a reason. If you're going to, try to qualify and kind of be hellbent in the short term to do so, find someone that has this deck, build it yourself, whatever, and play this. On the other hand, if you're trying to look for a more long-term fit that is, pretty good in the format right now in the short term, and I expect to be very good in the long term, I actually have a few decks that we can look at and, again, kind of explain why they're going to be good going forward. So first we have Jeskai Control. This is a deck that we went over actually on Monday. I don't think this list in particular, maybe it is, kind of looks like it at a glance. So Jeskai Control getting a lot better because of these energy cards and Galvanic Discharge. You have Tune the Narrative, which allows you to draw a card and get 2 energy for 1 mana. Of course, Wrath of the Skies also being a big part of it as well, because this allows you to have a 2 mana Wrath that is going to clear the board. Sure, you might be out of energy at that point, but you're able to Wrath the Skies and then leave up Counterspell, or even play something like a Tune the Narrative, Galvanic Discharge, and kind of kill your opponent's follow-up play, which is a good way that the control deck can kind of stay ahead. Flage has proven to be one of the best, of the 3 Titans, like one of the best Titans in the format. Of course, Uro being banned, and I think even Javier is saying that like Flage is like kind of on the level of Uro, which is kind of saying a lot because this card was not very hyped at all when it was spoiled, and has become one of the best creatures in the Modern Horizons 3 set, not named Nadu. It gets to play defense very well. You know, you get to deal 3 damage to anything. A lot of the creatures that are seeing play, dealing 3 damage most of the time ends up killing them. And of course, getting to gain 3 life, buffer your life total against some of the more aggressive decks. And then being able to escape it well, the 6/6 body, getting to then hit something else for 3. And then in conjunction with Arena of Glory to give, whenever you cast a creature spell with the mana, you give it haste, getting to essentially 12 your opponent, or end up killing 2 small creatures or 1 really big creature with this, is a big game, because again, that just buffers your life total. You gain 6 life as well as hitting your opponent for 6, getting rid of their big threat. There's a lot of tempo swing there that you have to like from the Jeskai control side. Of course, Teferi Time Raveler is still a very powerful card. Getting to Wrath of the Skies and speed, I shouldn't have to tell you, is really good, but it is very good, and it allows you to spend all of your mana to get additional energy and kind of keep your energy reserves up for future Wrath of the Skies, or even taking down bigger threats with Galvanic Discharge. Solitude, still a very good card in this deck. You know, just getting to Swords of Plowshare or something, and of course, spend your mana on this thing to kind of have it stick around, get rid of your opponent's threat, especially dealing with Flage is really important. And then, of course, getting to gain life as well to make racing a little bit harder. Usual suspects, the 1 rings here. This is a good Magic card if you haven't heard. Also very expensive. You have Lorien Revealed as ways to kind of get some of your other islands out of the deck. You see like a Xander's Lounge seeing play. You see that kind of for these prismatic endings that can go up to 4 CMC, things that can get exile, conveniently big enough to get the 1 ring. You have Forced Negation is like free counter magic on your opponent's turn, or I guess a free negate rather on like your opponent's turn, and having the added benefit of exiling the card as well. Sideboard, you know, Cosign of Memory has been a pretty big thing that people have been playing in the sideboard, and has turned out to be really good. Yeah, that's all I can say about it. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good Magic card. And I actually believe this is the deck list that we looked at, but that's basically what this Jeskai control deck has going on. The things I like about it, and we're going to hear about the Boros energy deck as well. Flage is a very powerful Magic card. This just giving you so much tempo of, you know, on turn 3, just hitting one of your opponent's creatures for 3 damage, you gaining 3 life, getting the annoying creature off the board, and then Flage just gets to sit in the graveyard until either you have an Arena of Glory in play and enough cards to bring it back. Even if you don't have an Arena of Glory, still bringing it back, getting to deal with one of your opponent's smaller creatures. The 6/6 body is going to check a lot of the things. It's a lot of energy people have to invest in a Galvanic Discharge to deal with a Flage, and it only really deals with it for a short time, because this deck, thanks to cards like Lorien Revealed, getting to play like Tune the Narrative to kind of fill the graveyard, and of course, just again having all these like cheap spells, even getting to like Evoke Solitudes and, you know, whatever else, you know, all these fetch lands, you're going to be able to get back this Flage pretty quickly. I think this is definitely a key card of the deck. Obviously, of course, the 1 ring is a very key card in this deck as well. Just giving you protection, be able to like stall out like an additional turn, draw some extra cards so you can find that Wrath of the Skies, you know, with all those extra draws, and kind of like clear the board. And then at that point, you can kind of work on dealing with your own 1 ring or drawing a bunch more cards with it to kind of further put the game out of reach for your opponent. I think this is going to be a solid option going forward. I think control decks a lot of the time do very well in either like mostly solved meta games where, you know, the 1-for-1 interaction and the, you know, wrath type effects are very good. And while I think Nadu is like the best deck to end up playing Wrath of the Skies against, I think also kind of going forward, the Boros energy decks where their creatures are pretty low to the ground, the Galvanic Discharges aren't going to be very good against them kind of once they get going, but like the Wrath of the Skies will be, because it cares about the converted mana cost. So, you know, most of their stuff is like 2 and 3. They're spending, you know, 3 to 6 energy as long as you're kind of able to survive, you know, some of the assault, where if you go like the 1 ring into Wrath of the Skies, you know, you're going to be in pretty good shape. I think Jeskai Control is a pretty good counterpick against like those Boros energy decks. I think it's pretty decent against the mono black decks as well. While Necrodominance is definitely an annoying card to deal with kind of once it hits the board, because you don't really have a lot of good options to kind of stop it once it sticks to the battlefield. You know, obviously you have some things after the fact, but you're not going to be able to make it so they don't get a trigger from their Necro Dominance. They're going to be able to draw some cards and, you know, potentially get some value out of it as well. And, you know, potentially draw a backup copy as well. You're trying to, you know, play catch up with it, you know. But aside from that, Jeskai Control, very solid option. If you are a savvy control player, I would definitely suggest playing Jeskai Control. I've seen a lot of good players that are playing Jeskai Control, and they just make it look easy. And I think Flage is the real deal. And I think that, you know, this makes it a very solid option. Even in a Nadu meta currently, I think it's a very good. And even in a post-Nadu world, I think maybe it gets a little bit worse because I think it is kind of a good and direct counter to the Nadu decks. But, you know, decks always adapt and overcome things that are going on. I think Jeskai Control is good, that it's going to be able to adapt to, you know, one of the best decks in Modern's history, you know, being gone from the format, and is poised to kind of take control of, you know, one of the top spots in the Modern metagame. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at another energy deck that is doing something a little bit different from what Jeskai Control is doing, but is also, you know, a very impactful deck in the Modern format. So Boros Energy, if you didn't know that Nadu was like the best deck in the format and that people were putting up results with it, whatever, you would think that Boros Energy was like cracked, that it was absolutely the best deck in the format. Guide of Souls being this like super amped Soul Sisters that gives you added benefit of getting to pay energy, give your creature, you know, additional power and toughness by giving it 2+1/+1 counters, and giving a flying counter. It being an angel really doesn't help. There's definitely cards that care about angels, but this deck is not playing them, just because the +2/+2 and flying, and, you know, having that be permanent on top of, you know, a lot of the, you know, with Ajani, like Nakatl Pariah, Ocelot Pride seeing a lot of play as well. A card that people, I don't think, were very excited to see, but it, you know, it turns out Ocelot Pride in conjunction with like Guide of Souls as well, you know, you're able to gain a ton of life. You're not even have to attack with the Ocelot Pride. You just have to sort of kind of be able to protect it or have multiple copies of it. You're going to get the Seize Blessing real quick, and you're going to flood the board with cats that are also going to gain you a ton of life and a ton of energy. And then, you know, the more of these Guide of Souls you play as well, the more you're going to be able to trigger this ability to kind of give those cat tokens, you know, flying, and make it even harder for your opponent to deal with. And even giving like first strike on these things too. Just there's a ton of synergy just in these two 1-drops here. On top of Ajani being a pretty busted Planeswalker on the other side, being able to make cat tokens, and then this deck even being able to use its +2 to great effect. By giving a +1/+1 counter on each cat you control, this can easily add, you know, north of like 5, 6, 7, 8 power to the board as well. And then even like make use of the -4, where an opponent chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a Planeswalker from among the non-land permanents, and they sacrifice the rest. So this is able to, you know, while you're going wide, your opponent's stuck to having like one creature and one Planeswalker, which Planeswalker isn't really going to be able to do much of anything. And you're kind of able to attack, again, pump with the Guide of Souls, and deal lethal damage to your opponent. This deck also getting to play Flage, because it turns out Flage is a amazing Magic card. This list in particular is playing Bone Crusher Giant. This is a way that you can prevent the One Ring's protection by you know, playing the Stomp side of it, where it says damage can't be prevented this turn. Protection prevents damage that would be dealt to you, in this case for the One Ring. So you're actually able to bypass the damage of the One Ring. With the Stomp, you just have to be able to deal 2 damage to something, more than likely yourself. Amp Raptor, we talked about, where this is essentially like a cascade type effect, but it's better in the fact that if you have a Guide of Souls in play on turn 1, you play an Amp Raptor on turn 2. You know, you get your life and your energy from the Guide of Souls first, then resolve the Amp Raptor trigger. You're going to go up to 3 energy, and you're going to be able to play anything in your deck. You know, even if you don't have a Guide of Souls on turn 1 or they kill it, you still have a decent amount of hits in the deck. You know, Unstable Amulet's a fine one, because you kind of get your energy back after casting it, and you're able to draw a card. This is also going to help you deal a little bit of chip damage to your opponent as well. As that card advantage. Even too, you get a little bit of value from Bone Crusher Giant, because you cast this from its adventure. You're casting a card from exile, meaning Unstable Amulet will deal damage to each opponent. We have Static Prison, which is a very good removal option that gives you 2 energy when it enters, and it gets rid of a non-land permanent an opponent controls, and you have to sacrifice it at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase unless you pay an energy. Doing this in pre-combat instead of on the upkeep means that you kind of get to look at your draw step and figure out, like, do I need to keep the Static Prison around, or, should I just pay the energy and kind of go another turn? Blood Moon has been very impactful. I'm surprised that this deck is only playing 2 of them. I've seen decks playing 3 and 4 copies of Blood Moon. Turns out, even in 2024, this card will absolutely hose your opponent. Fable the Mirror Breaker, basically, any reason to play red. And a lot of these decks now have more reasons, at least in Modern, to play red. And this is essentially the only reason to play red in Pioneer. So it's got to be good enough to see some Modern play. We see another Arena Glory in here, a little bit more useful than in the Jeskai control deck, because you do have a lot of creatures that you can give haste to. I mean, Amped Raptor, Bone Crusher Giant, Flage are some really good targets for using that red mana to haste up your creatures. You have, Aether Hub is like a way that you can get energy, and then you can use it to get mana of any color. You have some Surveil lands in here, and the Sacred Foundries and Fetch lands as well. On the sideboard, you get to play typical like red-white stuff, and we know that white is very good at playing hate cards, and we know that red, at least currently, thanks to Harsh Mentor, has some really good hate cards against the most played deck in the format currently. I think going forward, this deck just generates a ton of value. It's super low to the ground. Wrath of the Skies makes it really sad, but aside from that, I mean, it gets very efficient removal in Galvanic Discharge and Lightning Bolt. It gets card advantage with Unstable Amulet. It has Static Prison as like another kind of removal option for some annoying permanents that not permanent removal, but definitely very powerful. Blood Mooning your opponent is going to be sick when they're trying to do their like Jeskai control thing and whatnot. You just play a Blood Moon and your opponent's like completely hosed. Like they don't really have anything that they can do for the rest of the game until they draw their basics. Fable gets you a ton of value, of course. Playing 2 Fables, because if you manage to flip both of them until the end of time, you're going to have tons of Bone Crusher Giants and Raptors. Not Johnny's, but like Ocelot Prides and things like that. And turns out that's really good as well. Also interesting, too, that you can copy Ocelot Pride, and then if you have the City's Blessing, you essentially get to create a token that's a copy of Ocelot Pride. And I don't know how much of its original like text that it retains, but I think that if you copy an Ocelot Pride with its like trigger, you get to keep those Ocelot Prides. So if you just Fable an Ocelot Pride and you have the City's Blessing, you end up getting a ton of them. But this deck, super powerful. It's been good. It's been kind of dominating in a world full of Nadu, and I wouldn't expect it to really do anything different. There's like very few sideboard cards that it has to play, and very few cards that I think it's playing right now that it wouldn't want when Nadu eventually sees kind of the hammer come for it. So I would say that Boros Energy is, a very good pick. The energy decks in general have just seemed very, very powerful. So we got one more deck to go over. We'll hurry up and do it real quick because I know that I've rambled quite a bit in this video going over all these different decks and different things in the Modern metagame. So, we'll go over our last deck and then I'll kind of wrap things up very nicely, hopefully. So, finally, we have Mono Black Midrange. This is the, fancy pants Rich McGee deck here. I mean, almost $1,500 on tabletop. Absolutely disgusting. But, it's very good for a reason. This card, Necrodominance, turns out any fixed version of Necropotence is still broken. And Necrodominance is absolutely just an amazing card. Just the fact of the matter that you have to pay all the life up front. It triggers on your end step, whatever. Doesn't really matter because turns out like just getting to draw the cards, and even with Orcish Bowmaster being like a 4 of in a lot of these decks that end up playing black, just obviously the combination with Shieldred is absolutely insane. Getting to play cards like Soul Spike and the March of Wretched Sorrow is like a way that you can exile additional black cards, kind of gain some life, and keep going with this Necrodominance. Kind of, the old days of Necropotence plus Drain Life and, getting to play Dark Rituals and things like that. This deck also gets to play the One Ring, which, is like another essential Necrodominance in the deck where you just get to draw a ton of cards, even better at points because there's times where you get to draw the cards and then just play another ring and you essentially got to draw, however many cards for free without being on the hook for all that life. You have, these double-face cards like Fel the Profane, just, 4 mana removal isn't all that great, but the fact that, it's a black card and it's also a land as well, so it allows you to play 13 actual lands in your deck with 12 double-face cards, with some of them being like Bogart Trawler and the aforementioned Fel the Profane, which are lands that will come into play untapped, and then Malakar Rebirth, which comes into play tapped no matter what. This just allows you to have more chances to pitch cards with March of the Wretched Sorrow to kill some annoying things. and then also more black cards for Soul Spike to hopefully go to your opponent's face, deal them 4 damage, you're going to gain 4 life, and you're going to be able to get more cards later as a result. I guess technically nets you 1 card as well on like a future Necrodominance activation, so pretty neat to think about. We see like Break the Ice, Dauthi Voidwalker. We've seen Dauthi Voidwalker in some cases, like in the main deck here. You have the kind of scam starts in Grief plus Malakar Rebirth, and in some ways too, you have like turn 2. You have turn 2 Necrodominance with with a Grief pitch, or I guess an Evoke Grief on your turn. After playing like a Swamp or something like that, you're able to use Phyrexian Tower to sacrifice to get 2 black, make the 3rd black, Necrodominance as early as turn 2. This deck is nuts, to say the least. Mono black midrange is amazing. Just, again, Necro is a very powerful card, whether you're talking about potence or dominance. Absolutely busted magic card. Great magic card. Combined with Shieldred, combined with being able to play essentially a scam package in your deck, being able to be super light on lands, so you're never really missing black cards to pitch to your to pitch to your March of Wretched Sorrow or your Soul Spikes. You also get to play the One Ring. You get a lot of powerful black spells in the format. I think black is one of the most powerful colors in Magic right now, and especially in the modern format, even though it's not the most played deck in the format. Of course, we see a lot of Boros. We see a lot of the Jeskai decks and Bant with the Nadu decks. I think black is standalone one of the best colors to play in Magic right now. And this deck kind of proves it in a way where you have tons of card advantage, you have tons of disruption, you have tons of pressure you can put on your opponent. And, just I can't speak on it enough. Like, this is a deck that I would consider playing for the RCQ season for Modern going forward. Even in a Nadu world right now, I think it's really good. And I think in a post-Nadu world, it's going to get even better. Maybe it has the Targonons back. There's been talks of something like Soul Spike potentially getting banned or whatever. But I think this deck, or even Necrodominance being banned, but I don't really see this card getting banned. I think the fact that it's seeing such a low play will probably help this deck survive, for just a tiny bit of time until maybe later towards the end of the season before the regional championships happen for Modern. But yeah, so those are kind of the decks that we are looking at in terms of, post Nadu world. I think that they have the best utility right now, that if you want to compete from the jump, but you don't want to play Nadu and you're kind of willing to wait until it gets banned, whatever, you're able to play these decks. You're able to find some success. You don't have to go all in on Nadu in the early part and then audible to one of the other decks. You can play one of these other decks and be totally fine in the metagame and just find success your way. Of course, if you're going to play any of these decks, you're going to have to play test a lot. You're going to have to kind of understand what the Nadu decks are doing if you choose to play while Nadu is legal and you're not also playing the deck itself. I think it's still very important to kind of understand what the loops are and the key points and interactions to interact with the Nadu deck to try to help you in the best way possible to not just get absolutely blown out in those sort of matchups and stuff. But yeah, Modern's in a pretty interesting place. We're going to have a few different videos going up for Modern here over the next few weeks as we get into the RCQ season and we focus more on some of the Modern things going on rather than Pioneer, up until we kind of get Bloomburrow and we get the banned and restricted announcement that will basically help us shape what the Pioneer metagame will look like at Regional Championship Washington, D.C., because that's where it's at. If you are interested in any of that stuff, you're interested in the Modern format, you're interested in kind of the lead up to the Pioneer Regional Championship, of course, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell. If you have not already done so, I really do appreciate all the support I get on these videos, as we try to put a lot of effort. Well, I shouldn't even say a lot of effort, but I guess so. Like, I don't really have like the greatest editing abilities. I think it's pretty clear if you watch my videos and whatnot, but I try to jam pack as much information as I can and try to discuss as much as I can about the subject of these videos and stuff. I do put a lot of work in that way. So if you want to support me and my content, that's a free, easy way of doing so, and it of course is greatly appreciated by me. Of course, stay tuned for some videos coming later in the week about the Modern format. And, of course, the special videos that I try to do on Fridays. So that's going to be this video. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope to see you all in the next one.